She thought it was just another crash on a lonely mountain road until the soldier saw the blood trail and realized someone wanted that cop dead. What he uncovered beneath the wreck wasn't just a crime, it was a secret powerful enough to destroy the whole town. Betrayal, gunfire, and a hidden truth buried for decades. And in the middle of it all, one man and his loyal dog refused to back down. Because sometimes God's miracles don't come from angels, they come from warriors who still believe in the light. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and the miracles God hides in the darkest places. The Cascade Mountains lay veiled in a cold silver mist, the kind that muffled sound and thought alike. Ethan Cole moved through it as though it were another layer of memory pressing against his chest. Each step along the rocky trail echoed faintly, swallowed by the endless stillness of the high woods. For months he had lived in this solitude, no longer a soldier by command, but still one by instinct. The wilderness had become his sanctuary and his penance, a place where the ghosts of war dissolved into the sound of wind through the firs. But today the forest did not sound right. Somewhere ahead, carried faintly on the cold air, came a metallic groan followed by a low human cry. Ethan froze. His hand tightened around the strap of his pack, and the muscle in his jaw twitched with an old reflex, the kind learned in deserts and alleys where cries often meant traps. Then came the sound again, sharper this time, desperate and raw. "Max," he murmured. The German shepherd beside him raised his head. Once a military K-9, Max had served in the same combat unit as Ethan, his instincts honed by the same chaos. Since returning home, neither of them had managed to find peace. The bond they shared was less about companionship and more about survival, a silent understanding between two beings who had seen too much. Ethan followed the sound through the undergrowth until the trees parted, revealing a narrow ravine slick with rain and mud. Below, a police cruiser lay on its side, the blue and white body mangled against a boulder. Steam hissed from the engine, one headlight flickered weakly, pulsing like a heartbeat that refused to stop. The air smelled of gasoline and burnt rubber. He slid down the embankment, mud splattering his hands. "Hello?" he called out. "Is anyone there?" From inside the wreck came a soft cough, followed by a woman's strained voice. "Help! Please! Can't move!" The sound of that voice, the brittle courage beneath the pain, triggered something in Ethan. He remembered another voice years ago from a radio call in Kandahar, a medic trapped under debris, asking for help that arrived too late. He had carried that memory like shrapnel ever since. He pushed harder at the crumpled door, feeling metal slice through his gloves. With a final grunt, the latch gave way, and he saw her. A woman in a torn police uniform, pinned beneath the steering wheel, her left arm slick with blood. Her name badge, half bent, read Emma Brooks. She was conscious, but fading fast, her face pale, her breathing shallow. "Stay with me," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm, the way soldiers talk when fear is the enemy. Her eyes fluttered. They're coming back," she whispered. "Don't let them take the drive." What drive? But she had already slipped into unconsciousness. Ethan scanned the area quickly. The driver's seat was empty, no weapon, no radio, and on the ground, half buried in mud, were two sets of boot prints, one leading toward the main road, one returning from it. Whoever had done this was organized and unhurried. It was no accident. He hoisted Emma out of the wreck, her body limp but still breathing. Max circled the car, nose low to the ground, growling softly. He looked up at Ethan and let out a short bark. Alert, warning. "I know," Ethan said quietly. "We're not alone." Something cracked in the distance, a branch, maybe, or a boot on wet soil. Ethan crouched, his heartbeat sinking with the silence around him. The instincts that had once saved his life overseas now roared awake. He spotted movement through the mist. Two silhouettes standing at the tree line, watching. One of them raised an arm as if to point. Then they vanished. No hesitation. Ethan carried Emma toward the tree line on the opposite side, keeping low. Max stayed close, his body tense but controlled. The climb was brutal, the slope slick and unforgiving. By the time they reached the ridge, Ethan's arms burned from the effort, but he didn't stop until the wreck was out of sight. He laid Emma gently against a fallen log. Rain began to fall in thin, cold threads. Her pulse was faint, but steady. He tore open a medical pouch from his pack. Old field habits never left him, and cleaned the wound with shaking hands. As he wrapped the gauze around her arm, he found something beneath her vest, a small waterproof pouch tied with cord. Inside was a data card, military-grade encryption. Whatever she'd been guarding was worth killing for. Ethan stared at the card, his reflection flickering in its surface. He didn't need to open it to understand the weight it carried. His gut told him this was more than local corruption. It was the kind of rot that spread upward, invisible but powerful. And now it was in his hands. Thunder rumbled distantly. Max pressed closer, his body tense. Ethan looked toward the mist again, half expecting the figures to reappear. They didn't. Still, he felt eyes on them. He could almost hear his old commander's voice. Never stay in one place after contact. He lifted Emma again, cradling her carefully. "We're moving, buddy," he told Max. "Back to the cabin." The three of them disappeared into the woods, swallowed by fog and rain. As they walked, Ethan's thoughts drifted between the woman in his arms and the echoes of his past. He had once believed his fight was over, that he had left the battlefields behind. But as he looked down at the faint streak of blood across his sleeve, he realized something he had long tried to deny. A man like him doesn't stop fighting. He just changes enemies. When they reached the small mountain cabin that served as Ethan's retreat, he laid Emma on the cot near the fireplace. Max settled near the door, head resting on his paws, ears twitching at every distant sound. Ethan lit the fire, then turned his gaze back to the woman he had just saved. The data card glinted faintly in the firelight. Outside, the rain intensified, tapping against the wooden walls like a warning. Ethan could feel the storm moving closer, not the one in the sky, but the one behind the trees. He poured a small measure of whiskey into a tin cup and sat beside the fire, watching the flames twist and tremble. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was running from the past. He felt like he was walking straight into it. Somewhere in the darkness, a low growl rippled from Max's throat. Ethan didn't move. He didn't need to look to know what the dog was telling him. The hunters had found their trail. He took a slow breath, eyes on the fire. "Then let them come," he whispered. "We'll be ready." The night pressed down over the Cascade Forest, thick with fog and the faint smell of pine smoke. Inside the small cabin, the fire had burned low, leaving a dim orange glow that danced across the rough wooden walls. Ethan Cole sat near the hearth, listening to the rhythmic patter of rain on the roof while his mind replayed the day's chaos. Emma Brooks lay unconscious on the cot, her breathing shallow but steady. The medical gauze he'd wrapped around her shoulder was stained dark through the center. Max rested by the door, his ears twitching to every faint noise beyond the cabin walls. For hours, Ethan hadn't moved. Stillness had become his camouflage. But inside, his thoughts churned like a storm. He had seen too many scenes like this, too many broken bodies, too many secrets buried under orders. The difference was, this time, he wasn't following anyone's command. He had chosen to step into the fire again. A faint groan escaped from the cot. Ethan was instantly at her side. Emma's eyes fluttered open, confusion flickering in them before recognition settled in. "You pulled me out, didn't you?" she whispered. Ethan nodded, offering her a sip of water. She drank slowly, wincing as the movement sent pain down her arm. "Where are we?" "Safe, for now." Her gaze darted to the table where Ethan had placed the encrypted data card. "You found it?" Her voice was almost a whisper. "That thing, it's the reason they tried to kill me." Ethan leaned back slightly, studying her expression. "Who's they?" For a moment she said nothing. Then her eyes clouded, and her words came out like fragments of a nightmare. "Officers, from our own department, men I've worked with for years. I was assigned to escort an evidence transport from Silver Ridge to the Federal Task Office in Seattle. Halfway through the route, dispatch went silent. Then the ambush hit." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What was on the drive?" "Proof," she said softly, "that our chief, Harold Crane, has been laundering money and covering up killings linked to narcotics shipments. The FBI was closing in. He must have realized it. He sent his men to erase the trail, and me along with it." She looked at the flames, her face hardening. "I thought I'd die out there before I got to say it aloud." Silence hung between them for a long moment, filled only by the crackle of firewood. Ethan's instinct told him Crane's reach likely went beyond a single precinct. A man that careful, that ruthless, didn't build his empire alone. He picked up the data card, turning it over in his hand. "Does anyone else know about this?" "There was another officer," Emma said after a pause. "Detective Miles Garner. He's been helping me gather evidence for months. He's the one who told me where to hide the card if things went wrong, but now I don't know if he's alive." Ethan glanced toward Max, who was still fixed on the door. The dog's calm vigilance was a comfort, yet it also meant danger wasn't far. "We'll figure it out," he said. "You need rest. In the morning, we'll move." She wanted to argue, but exhaustion took over. Within minutes, her eyes closed again. When dawn arrived, the forest outside was drenched in pale mist. Ethan stepped out quietly, scanning the tree line. The road below was empty. No tracks near the cabin, no signs of intrusion, yet the silence felt too perfect, an unnatural stillness that made his instincts crawl. Max padded up beside him, nose lifted to the air, every muscle alert. Ethan crouched, hand brushing the dog's collar. "I know," he muttered. "They're still hunting." By mid-morning, Emma could walk, though her arm trembled when she tried to button her jacket. "You should have gone," she said, watching Ethan pack the gear. "You don't owe me this." "You're wrong," he replied, slipping the card into a waterproof pouch. "If Crane's doing what you say, then it's bigger than you or me. I've spent years trying to outrun the fight, and all I've found was silence. Maybe this is what I was meant to find." Before she could respond, Max's growl cut through the room, low, vibrating, warning. Ethan was at the window in an instant. Through the fog, headlights blinked faintly along the forest road. 2 vehicles, maybe 3. Emma's breath caught. "They found us." Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. "Not yet, but they will." He glanced around the cabin, 1 door, 1 back window, a chimney too narrow to climb. The terrain outside offered little cover except for a cluster of fallen trees by the ravine. "We move now," he said. "Take only what you can carry." Emma hesitated, her eyes darting toward the bandaged arm. Ethan shook his head. "I'll handle the weight. You just keep up." He slipped the drive into his vest and nodded to Max. The dog moved to the door, muscles taut, ready. The vehicles stopped in the distance. Doors opened, voices, faint, deliberate, moving closer. Ethan led them through the back of the cabin into the trees. The air was thick with moisture. Every step sank into wet soil. He guided them downhill toward the ravine, where the fog hung low enough to swallow shapes whole. Behind them came the sound of boots and radio chatter. The pursuers were disciplined, sweeping in a coordinated line. Halfway down the slope, a sharp whistle pierced the silence, followed by a single gunshot that cracked the air like lightning. Bark exploded near Ethan's head. "Go!" he shouted, shoving Emma forward. Max lunged ahead, barking once to distract the shooters. Bullets tore through branches as they sprinted through the fog. Ethan's focus narrowed. The rhythm of pursuit, the breath of survival. He knew they couldn't outrun forever. They had to vanish. He spotted a stream cutting through the rocks below and led them into it. Cold water surged over their boots, masking their scent and tracks. They followed it for what felt like miles until the gunfire faded to distant echoes. Only when the forest returned to silence did Ethan slow. Emma leaned against a tree, her chest heaving. "Who are you?" she asked between breaths. "No one," he said simply. "Just someone who's tired of seeing people like Crane win." The words hung heavy, carried by the mist. Above them, the first slice of sunlight broke through the clouds, touching the forest floor with pale gold. It looked like peace, but Ethan knew better. Peace was the lie men told themselves before the next battle began. He crouched by the water, letting the cold soak into his skin. Max stood beside him, alert but calm. "We'll have to reach someone we can trust," Ethan said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "If this data gets buried, she dies for nothing." He looked toward Emma, who was silently watching him, the fear in her eyes now mixed with something steadier, resolve. "Silver Ridge has a library," she said finally. "Old building by the town hall. There's an archivist there, Mr. Lang. He helped me once, months ago. He knows how to access restricted police files. If he's still there, he can help decode the data." Ethan nodded. "Then that's where we go." Behind them, Max gave a low whine. Ethan turned. Far up the slope, faint through the fog, a glint of metal caught the morning light, a rifle scope aimed in their direction. He pulled Emma down and hissed, "Don't move." Another shot rang out, cutting through the air and striking the tree just above them. The bark exploded into shards. Ethan raised his eyes toward the ridge, his voice a whisper edged with steel. "They're not giving up, are they, Max?" The dog didn't bark this time. He just stared into the mist, unblinking. The hunt wasn't over. It had only begun. The fog had lifted by noon, revealing the wet glimmer of Silver Ridge, a mountain town perched between pines and old secrets. Ethan Cole and Emma Brooks reached the outskirts on foot, moving through the back trails like ghosts. Max trotted beside them, every sense awake, his silent confidence keeping them anchored. They had traveled since dawn, avoiding roads, resting only when necessary. Emma's wound had begun to stiffen, but she refused to slow down. The fear that they were being followed weighed heavier than her pain. Ethan had seen this kind of determination before, in soldiers who had nothing left to lose but the truth. The town looked calm, almost idyllic, but Ethan knew better. Calm was a mask, and this place had been wearing it for a long time. They stopped behind an abandoned gas station overlooking Main Street. The hum of distant engines and the faint buzz of a radio reached them. "If Crane's men are still searching," Ethan said, "they'll be watching every road out of town." Emma nodded, eyes fixed on the cluster of brick buildings below. "The library's 2 blocks from the town hall. It's quiet there, no cameras inside. Mr. Lang should be working the afternoon shift." They waited until a delivery truck passed before slipping through the alleyways toward the old Silver Ridge Public Library. The building was massive but aged, its faded red brick streaked with rain. Ivy crawled across the western wall like veins on an old scar. Ethan pushed the door gently. It was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled of paper and time. Rows of shelves stretched into the dimness, broken by columns of yellow light from the tall windows. Behind the main desk sat Mr. Lang, the town's archivist. He was in his late 60s, dressed plainly, his thinning hair neatly combed back. His voice, when he greeted them, carried the weight of someone used to whispering in dangerous places. "You shouldn't have come through the front door," he said without looking up. "There are eyes everywhere." He finally raised his gaze, recognition flashing across his face as he saw Emma. "I heard what happened. They said you were dead." "Almost," Emma replied. "I need your help again, Mr. Lang. We found the drive." The old man exhaled slowly and gestured toward the back. "Follow me." He led them down a narrow hallway that ended in a small records room lined with steel cabinets. A humming server unit sat in the corner, blinking faintly. "This system is off-grid," he explained. "Built it myself years ago when the department started erasing their own archives. Some files deserve to survive, even if people don't want them to." Ethan watched as Lang inserted the encrypted data card into a terminal. "Can you read it?" he asked. "Maybe," Lang murmured, typing commands with practiced precision. "Depends on the level of encryption. Whoever encoded this knew what they were doing." He paused, brow furrowing. "But I've seen this signature before. It's the same key format used in police evidence databases. Crane's division." Emma's voice was low. "So it's genuine." "Genuine," Lang said, "and dangerous." Lines of text flooded the screen, financial records, photos, even scanned affidavits signed by Crane himself. Ethan leaned closer. "He covered up murders," he said quietly. "Civilians, maybe officers who tried to expose him." Lang nodded grimly. "One of them was my son." For a moment no one spoke. Lang's hands trembled slightly as he scrolled through the data. "He was a deputy," he said. "Found something he shouldn't have. 2 weeks later, he fell asleep at the wheel on Highway 19. I've been keeping what I could ever since." The grief in his voice wasn't loud, but it filled the room like smoke. Ethan met his eyes and understood. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was personal for everyone caught in Crane's web. Suddenly, Max's low growl broke the silence. He turned toward the window slit high on the wall, ears rigid. Ethan moved quickly, peering through the narrow glass. A black SUV had parked across the street. Two figures in dark coats stepped out, scanning the area with intent. "They're here," he muttered. Lang's face tightened. "Back entrance, through the archive cellar. Go now." Emma hesitated. "Lang, you have to come with us." "No," he said firmly. "If I move, they'll notice. I'll stall them. You get that evidence out of town." He looked at Ethan. "There's an old access tunnel below the library. Was used during the mining years. Leads to the river outside the ridge. Take it." Ethan's instinct argued against leaving anyone behind, but the man's resolve was unshakable. Lang had already chosen his battlefield. They followed him down into the basement, where the air turned damp and cold. Lang pointed to a heavy metal door half hidden behind stacked crates. "This opens into the tunnels. Go straight until you reach a fork. Take the right passage. The left one collapsed years ago." He pressed something into Ethan's palm, a small flash drive. "Backup copy," he said quietly. "If I don't make it, make sure it sees daylight." Footsteps echoed above them, voices, sharp, commanding. Lang pushed Ethan toward the door. "Go." Ethan hesitated for only a heartbeat before pulling Emma through. Max stayed close, looking back one last time as Lang bolted the cellar door behind them. The tunnel beyond was narrow and slick, carved through stone long before the town existed. The only light came from Ethan's small flashlight, the beam trembling against the walls. The echoes of pursuit faded behind them, replaced by the distant rush of underground water. They walked in silence until the tunnel widened into an open chamber. The air smelled faintly of iron and dust. Ethan paused, scanning the path ahead. "We're almost out," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Something about the place felt wrong, too quiet, too still. Max stepped forward, nose twitching, then suddenly froze. The dog's growl deepened, echoing against the stone. Ethan raised his light and saw movement, shadows shifting beyond the far wall. Before he could react, a harsh metallic clang reverberated through the tunnel. The entrance behind them slammed shut with a heavy lock. From the darkness ahead came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, confident. A voice followed, low and smooth. "You really should have stayed in the mountains, Mr. Cole." Ethan's stomach clenched. He knew that voice. It was Detective Miles Garner, the man Emma had trusted, the one she thought was helping her. He stepped into the light, a pistol glinting in his hand. "Funny thing about evidence," Miles said, his smile thin. "Sometimes it's better buried." Ethan didn't reach for his weapon. Not yet. He looked at Emma, whose face had gone pale. "You?" she whispered. "You were with Crane all along?" Miles shrugged. "With Crane? No. He's just a piece on the board. I'll work for someone higher." His eyes flicked to the drive in Ethan's vest. "Now hand it over, and maybe I'll let you keep breathing long enough to regret coming here." Max took a step forward, lips pulled back in silent fury. The tension in the tunnel felt electric, the air heavy with the promise of violence. Ethan met Miles's gaze, calm but burning. "You'll have to take it from me." The flashlight flickered once and went out, plunging the tunnel into darkness. Night had fallen over Silver Ridge, heavy and silent, the kind of darkness that swallowed sound and memory alike. Rain had stopped hours ago, but mist clung to the ground, veiling the abandoned rail yard where Ethan Cole and Emma Brooks had found temporary refuge. The broken windows rattled softly with each gust, and somewhere in the distance a train horn cried out, hollow, ghostly, fading. Ethan sat against a wall, rifle resting across his knees, eyes half closed but mind sharp as ever. He hadn't slept in 2 days. Max lay near the doorway, his head on his paws, ears twitching at every creak. They had been hunted since dawn, and the air still smelled of gunpowder and betrayal. Emma sat across from him, tending to her wound with strips of gauze salvaged from Ethan's medical kit. The blood had stopped, but the pain had not. Her voice broke the silence. "He was one of us, Ethan. Garner, he sat at my table, met my family." Ethan said nothing. He had learned long ago that words were small weapons in wars like this. Still, something in his eyes softened. "War doesn't always wear a uniform, Emma," he said quietly. "Sometimes it hides behind a badge." They both turned when Max suddenly lifted his head, growling low. The sound was deep, primal, a warning older than language itself. Ethan rose, rifle ready, eyes scanning the shadows outside. Through the fog, headlights flickered, a single vehicle approaching the depot road. "We've been found?" Emma whispered. Ethan's voice was steady. "No, we've been given a choice." The truck that rolled to a stop outside wasn't the black SUV from the ambush. It was an old pickup, civilian plates, engine still running. The driver stepped out slowly, an older man wrapped in a dark coat, his movements cautious but confident. He raised both hands. "Easy, soldier. I'm not one of them." Ethan's grip tightened anyway. "You'll have to prove that fast." The man took a step forward, the light from the truck casting deep lines across his weathered face. "Name's Reverend Samuel Price," he said, voice rough but steady. "You don't have to point that thing at me. I came because the Lord told me someone out here was running out of faith." Ethan hesitated. The name sounded familiar. He had seen it once on a plaque in front of the old chapel downtown. Emma lowered her weapon slightly. "You're the pastor who spoke at the memorial for the miners," she said, recognition dawning. Price nodded. "That was a long time ago, before Chief Crane decided the town didn't need faith, only fear." He approached the doorway, pausing just outside the threshold, as if respecting their space. "You're not safe here," he continued. "Crane's men are sweeping the ridge. They're burning files, closing mouths. I heard your names on the scanner." Ethan's voice was low. "How do you know all this?" The Reverend's gaze darkened. "Because I used to bless their meetings," he said, "until I realized their prayers weren't meant for God." A heavy silence followed. Ethan studied him, not as a soldier judging an enemy, but as a man searching for truth. Price didn't flinch. "You have something, don't you?" he asked. "Something that can bring 'em down." Emma exchanged a glance with Ethan, then nodded. "A data drive, but it's encrypted. Garner was supposed to decode it before—" Her voice faltered. "Before he betrayed us." Price sighed, the sound carrying years of sorrow. "Then we'll need to find someone else who can." He led them through back roads and old forest trails to the church at the edge of town. The chapel was barely standing, its roof bowed, its bell cracked, its wooden cross leaning as if burdened by time. Inside, candles flickered in the dark, their light dancing over faded hymnals and dust-covered pews. Ethan had never been a man of religion, but there was something grounding in that fragile glow. At the altar, a young woman sat beside an open laptop, typing quickly. She looked up as they entered. "Reverend?" she asked. "These are the people I told you about," Price said. "This is Lena Ward, one of my parishioners, and the best coder this town's ever tried to ignore." Lena smiled faintly, brushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. I used to work in IT for the sheriff's office, before I found out I was encrypting other people's lies. Her fingers moved swiftly over the keyboard. Let's see what secrets your drive has been keeping. While she worked, Ethan paced, the soldier in him restless. Max sat nearby, eyes fixed on the door. Emma stood by a stained glass window, the light from her flashlight casting shifting colors across her bruised face. "You ever wonder," she murmured, "if God watches all this and still believes in us?" Price, standing near the altar, turned toward her. "Faith isn't about believing God watches," he said. "It's about believing He still cares, even when we don't deserve it." The words settled over the room like a quiet prayer. Moments later, Lena straightened, eyes wide. "Got it!" The files were police logs and payment records, transfers from offshore accounts tied to Chief Crane, but also to someone higher, federal level, someone named D. Murphy. Ethan froze. "Daniel Murphy?" Lena nodded. "The name's on half the documents. Whoever he is, he funded everything. The drugs, the cover-ups, even the ambushes." Price exhaled slowly. "Then Crane isn't the head. He's just a gatekeeper." Ethan's mind was already racing. "We take this to the press, they'll bury it before it airs. We need the FBI. Emma stepped forward. "There's a contact. Agent Jensen, Chicago field office. He owes you, right?" Ethan looked at her in surprise. "How do you know that?" "Because you called his name in your sleep 2 nights ago," she said, softly. "You trust him?" He hesitated, then nodded. Before he could speak, Max suddenly rose, teeth bared, growling at the entrance. A second later, the front windows shattered, gunfire ripping through the night. Lena screamed, diving behind a pew. Ethan grabbed Emma, pulling her down as bullets splintered the wood above them. Price ducked behind the altar, shouting a desperate prayer that mingled with the sound of chaos. Ethan returned fire through the shattered window, but he could see little beyond the muzzle flashes in the fog. "They found us!" Emma shouted. "We have to move!" Max lunged toward the door, barking furiously, his growl echoing through the church like thunder. Ethan grabbed the drive from Lena's trembling hands. "Basement!" Price shouted. "There's a tunnel under the altar. It leads to the old railway." Ethan covered them as they scrambled toward the hidden hatch. He turned just long enough to see a dark silhouette outside, a man holding a rifle and shouting orders. Even at the flickering light, Ethan recognized him. Detective Garner, not dead, not gone. His voice carried through the rain-soaked night. "End of the line, Cole!" Ethan's blood ran cold. Garner was alive and leading the hunt. As the hatch slammed shut behind them, the last sound before the tunnel's darkness swallowed them was Max's growl and the echo of Garner's laughter drifting through the broken church. Morning crept slowly over the mountains, casting long, broken rays through the fractured windows of the abandoned train depot where the firefight had ended hours before. The air still carried the metallic tang of gunpowder and rain. Ethan Cole sat near the doorway, a bloodied bandage wrapped around his arm, his breath steady but shallow. Beside him, Max lay silent, his flank rising and falling, exhaustion carved deep into every breath. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, growing nearer, but too late for the storm that had already passed. The night before had been chaos. After escaping the tunnel beneath the library, Ethan, Emma, and Max had fought their way through the collapsing mine shaft. While Detective Miles Garner pursued them, the fight had ended when the ceiling gave way, separating them in the dark. Now the sun was rising, painting the ruins gold, as if to remind Ethan that even endings deserved light. He turned his gaze toward Emma, who sat across from him, clutching the data drive against her chest like a relic. Her face was streaked with soot and grief, yet her eyes were fierce. She had seen too much to ever look away again. "You think they'll believe it?" she asked quietly. Ethan shook his head. "Not yet, but they'll have to face it once it's in the open." He paused. "Where's Garner?" Her answer came not in words, but in silence. Somewhere beneath the collapsed tunnels lay the man who had once been her friend, his last words echoing through the smoke. "You don't know who's really pulling the strings." Ethan wished he didn't still care about that sentence, but he did. Because men like Garner weren't born corrupt. They were made that way piece by piece by systems that traded loyalty for survival. He knew it because he'd seen the same transformation in war. A faint crackle came from the corner of the room. Emma's radio, damaged but functional, came alive with static. A voice broke through, calm, precise, official. "This is Special Agent Mark Jensen with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. To any surviving units or witnesses in Silver Ridge, respond." Ethan leaned forward. "Jensen, it's Cole. I've got the drive and Officer Brooks. Crane's operation is exposed, but it's not just him. We need extraction before they erase what's left." There was a pause, then a short reply. "Copy that, Cole. Hold your position. Units inbound and good work." The line went dead, leaving the faint hum of the morning. Emma gave a weary smile. "He sounds like someone who still believes in happy endings." Ethan didn't answer. He wasn't sure he did anymore. They left the depot minutes later, following the old railway line that wound through the edge of town. Silver Ridge was waking up, shops opening, people sweeping their porches, unaware of the war that had been fought beneath their feet. The calm almost felt cruel. As they passed the old sheriff's office, Ethan stopped. The door was ajar, and inside, papers littered the floor. On the wall hung a photo of Chief Harold Crane, smiling proudly beside his officers. Ethan walked in slowly, tore the picture down, and tossed it into the trash. "Justice starts here," he muttered. Behind the office, the sound of an approaching vehicle made him turn. A black sedan rolled up the street, but instead of Crane's men, it bore FBI markings. Jensen stepped out, tall and composed, a man built from years of discipline. He looked at Ethan and offered a brief nod. "You've had quite a night." His eyes shifted to Emma. "Ma'am, we'll need that drive." Emma hesitated, then handed it over. Jensen glanced at the files before securing it in a metal case. "This is enough to bring Crane and half his network down. But you were right. There's more above him. I've seen whispers of a federal contact shielding the operation. We'll need time." Ethan folded his arms. "You'll get your time, but you make sure this one doesn't disappear like the others." Jensen met his eyes. "Not this time. You have my word." As the agents moved to secure the area, Emma approached Ethan. "When this is over, what will you do?" she asked. He looked at the horizon where fog still clung to the peaks. "Maybe head north, find quiet again. Or maybe I'll finally stop running." She smiled faintly. "You say that like quiet ever lasts." He gave a small shrug. "Maybe it's not supposed to. Maybe peace is something we earn a piece at a time." The sound of engines roared down the road, convoys of FBI vehicles heading into the heart of Silver Ridge. Ethan watched as officers in black vests moved swiftly, entering the courthouse and Crane's residence. Within an hour, it was over. Harold Crane was brought out in handcuffs. his once proud stride broken, his eyes hollow. As he passed, he caught sight of Ethan. "You don't understand what you've done," Crane hissed. "You think cutting down one man changes anything?" Ethan's answer was quiet, but steady. "It changes this town." Crane was loaded into a van and driven away. The crowd that had gathered murmured softly, disbelief and anger blending into one sound. For the first time in decades, Silver Ridge felt the weight of truth. Emma stood beside Ethan, her shoulders straight, despite her fatigue. "Do you ever wonder if it's worth it?" she asked. "All the blood for a little justice?" Ethan looked at her, then at Max, who stood proudly beside them, tail still and eyes clear. "Yeah," he said, "every drop." By late afternoon, Jensen returned with news. "The data's already en route to Washington. Internal Affairs will handle what's left." But Cole, what Garner said before he died about a higher hand, he wasn't lying. "We found coded payments from a private security firm that doesn't exist on any registry. Someone powerful funded all this." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then it's not over." Jensen's expression darkened. "No, but we'll be ready." The sun began to dip, painting the town in amber light. Emma walked to the edge of the ridge where the river ran below. Ethan joined her, both silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but sure. "You could stay, you know. Silver Ridge will need rebuilding. People will need someone who remembers what was lost." Ethan looked out over the valley where smoke from chimneys rose like ghosts into the sky. "Maybe," he said, "but some ghosts need to keep moving." He turned toward Max, who met his gaze with the same wordless loyalty that had carried them through every battle. "Ready to go, partner?" The dog gave a low affirmative bark. Together they began walking down the mountain road, leaving behind the flashing lights and sirens. Emma watched until they disappeared into the trees, her hand resting over the place where the data drive had once been, a reminder that truth was a fragile thing, easily lost, but worth every risk to protect. The wind rose gently, carrying the scent of rain and pine through the quiet town. Somewhere beyond the ridge, thunder rolled, not of war, but of renewal. Sometimes miracles don't come with trumpets from the heavens or blinding beams of light. Sometimes they arrive quietly, through a weary soldier who refuses to walk away, through a loyal dog who guards without fear, or through a broken soul who still chooses to stand for what's right. What happened in Silver Ridge wasn't just a fight for justice. It was proof that God still works through ordinary hearts. He moves in the courage to tell the truth, in the loyalty of a friend who never leaves, and in the strength to do good even when no one is watching. Every day we pass by people carrying silent battles. The single mother, the lonely veteran, the neighbor who smiles but hides a storm inside. And maybe, just maybe, we are meant to be the miracle they've been praying for. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it. Let someone else remember that light still wins, that faith still heals, that kindness still saves. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, your city, your state, or your country. And may God bless you and everyone you love. May He guide your path, strengthen your heart, and remind you that no act of goodness ever goes unseen. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the world still needs stories where faith defeats fear and love outlasts the darkness.